Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talent Smart EQ's LinkedIn Live series, Emotional Intelligence for Your Everyday Life. We would love to know where everybody's coming in from. So on your right side of your screen in the comment section, feel free to let us know where you're chiming in from, where you're all getting relaxed, whether it's late breakfast or maybe it's lunch for you. We're going to make sure that you get all set for a great discussion that we're going to have about why human-centric leadership is critical right now. And so while everybody else is coming in, I'm going to ask my two guests where they're coming from. So LaTanya, where are you calling in from today?
I am calling in from Smithfield, Virginia.
Very nice. How's the weather that way?
It is nice and warm.
Very cool. Nice and warm. Okay, that's good to hear. How about you, Howard? Where are you at?
I'm in San Diego, David, and it is warm here as well. We have been complaining unfairly about a lot of clouds here, but it's the sun is back in San Diego and it's toasty.
Well, thank God, because I hate when I hear that you people do not have 365 days of summer out there. I mean,
you show us no empathy, do you?
It's awful. It's awful. I see we got Kevin from Dallas and Veronica in Phoenix. We got some out-of-towners. Awesome. June, welcome from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Love it. Ian in Greenville. Let's see. Oh, we have somebody near you, Howard, Helena in San Diego. And we also have Joy in Nigeria. Welcome. So excited to see all these names. A couple of familiar faces who've joined us in the past. Keep on letting us know where you're from. I'm excited about my guests, but before I introduce them, let me remind everybody that Talent Smart EQ is the world's premier provider of emotional intelligence assessments and programs around the world. We are based in San Diego, California. I'm David Brzezowski, Director of Training with Talent Smart, and I'm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have a little bit of a gloomy day today. However, it's not to complain because we've had some beautiful weather recently too. And welcome Jennifer from Pennsylvania as well. I'm sure she's not that far from me. So let me introduce you my two guests that we have. First off, we have LaTanya Sumter. She is the CEO and founder of Sumter Consulting, as well as the Talent Development Manager at Smithfield Foods. With Smithfield, by the way, for over 10 years. And I actually pulled this from LaTanya's LinkedIn profile because I thought it was so perfect for what we're talking about today. The quote that you say, LaTanya, I believe in the power of relationships and empathy. A big part of what we're going to talk about. So LaTanya, welcome to you.
Thank you so much.
And we also have Talent Smart's very own CEO for coming up on 4 years here. Previously with the Ken Blanchard organization for over 17 years, with 8 of those being president. So let's call it over 30 years of developing leaders' experience. Howard Farfel, welcome.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to be able to say that we are welcoming for the first time, not just all of our LinkedIn viewers, but we are live on Facebook and on YouTube. Congratulations to everybody who found us. We're so excited, and we're excited to have this conversation. So let's first say this out loud. Human-centric leadership. It's been, I would call like a trending topic for a little bit now. Maybe a buzzword out there, right? In the leadership development space. I think I probably heard this topic called human-centric leadership maybe about a year ago, but really it's been getting some hype. So I think it's really important for us to all be on the same page. So I'm going to turn to you, Howard, and ask you first, how would you actually define human-centric leadership? And I think probably more specifically is what makes human-centric leadership different from the leadership that we've all discussed in the past.
Yeah. Well, thank you, David. I think in its essence, it's really a people first approach, right? And I think it's based on this increasing realization that if we as leaders and organizations take care of our people, take care of our employees, they in turn will take care of their customers, or our customers. And I think that connection is what fuels this. If employees don't feel taken care of, don't feel respected, they're not going to take great care of their customers. It's just it's like a mirror, right? And if you're not taking great care of your customers, they're not going to stick around for very long. So I think this has kind of become more of a hallmark of, if you want to be a high performing organization, you got to have a people first approach. Take care of your people, they'll take care of your customers, and the customers will take care of the rest. So to me, that's what human-centric leadership is really all about. I think it is evolving and changing. I think if we look back in the history of leadership, models and things, there was originally more of a command and control type of approach. I think that there were leaders that were more, like all about, teaching, showing, telling, sometimes barking out orders, assuming that people will just follow, and counting on them to follow. And I think today, employees, they want to be part of something that is greater than themselves, that has a real purpose. They have a sense of belonging. They're asked for their input and to bring their whole selves to work. And to me, that is kind of, what it means to be kind of people first and human centric. Because I think one of the things I remember Ken Blanchard always saying is, because you can think, you're the smartest person in the room. You just want to tell everybody what the answers are.
Right.
People really, in general, don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And to me, that kind of goes through in the back of my head when I think about human-centric leadership.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said also about taking care of your customer. And I think often, I've been in the corporate world before joining Talent Smart for, almost 2 decades. And one of the conversations we always had was we all have customers, whether it's somebody else in the organization that I'm serving, or whether it's truly a customer out in the ether, if you will. So, LaTanya, let's talk about, since that's the what it is, let's talk a little bit about the why human-centric leadership is actually critical today more than ever. I mean, one of the things we said that we were going to talk about today in our promotions was why it's important today. So I ask it because I think that we can first all agree that building strong leaders is important, has always been important, and essential, by the way. But when we bring the human-centric part to the equation, it's kind of upping the game a bit. And I think what Howard just said helps us think about, like, why is it upping the game? So what would you share is the why it's important for this?
So, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the pandemic. So everybody's heard of the Great Resignation, which literally changed the way that we define work, how we do work, where we do work at, what is work. And so when we look at the pandemic and kind of the results of it, what we started to find was that people's options increased dramatically, right? So the external talent pool shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And so it really does highlight the importance of us turning to our internal talent and making sure, as Howard said, that we are taking care of our people, because it's not as easy as it once was to just pick up somebody else, right? I think another portion of that, interesting fact, the Gallup poll did a survey, and it found a couple things. The first thing is that 92% of people who switched jobs during the pandemic, or they quit their job, they reported that life is too short to continue to work for a place that I'm not passionate about and that I'm not being treated properly, right? Moreover,
that's powerful.
That's powerful, right? People decided, you know what? I can find a different way to live. Maybe we don't need 2 incomes. Maybe we can live off of 1. Some of that was forced, as we know, just because of the circumstances, right? But the other part of it is that it caused us to take a deeper look at what was important to us. And so that's why now more than ever, we have to make sure that we are, again, putting our people first. I understand that, businesses are for profit, right? So we got to make money just to keep the doors open. But to Howard's point earlier, it is, how do we make these profits? Well, it's the people, right? So I would say that is probably top reason why human-centric leadership is important right now. And generationally, we see the workforce changing. And so that also adds to the ingredients.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that is such a, something for us to consider, because if we go back to leading people the way we did, it may not necessarily work as well, because to your point, people are making different decisions than they did before, the pandemic, as to why they might leave an organization. I mean, you mentioned the Great Resignation, but we also had something that I thought was even scarier, which was quiet quitting.
Absolutely.
We had people making decisions to stick where they're at, but do a lot less than maybe they had normally done. So Howard, I think here's a great question for you. Having been in a space such as CEO here for 4 years, Blanchard organization for a long time, a big part of your role has been developing leaders, and let's put the word strong in there too, right? So I'm curious for you, have you had to evolve your leadership style or maybe even pivot now that we're looking at this more from like a human-centric aspect?
Yeah, I think it's people's leadership style. Certainly mine has been evolving for years. And I think some of the recent changes in the world force even, further development and evolving. And I was fortunate, I think, early on in my career to have mentors that were maybe ahead of their time with more of a people first mentality and recognition of why it's important to results. And I think what I learned from them and then from my time at Blanchard is, as you become a leader and you do pivot, it's like, how do I become more others focused as opposed to self-focused? So when I think about, my early management career, if I were to look back at that and watch myself, I was probably more self-focused, self-absorbed, versus really getting to a point where I am others focused, which again, I think is very similar to what people first and human-centric leadership is all about. So I think that's continuing to evolve. And, as LaTanya said, with hybrid workforce and remote, it just puts extra challenges on finding ways to connect and deliver that kind of others-focused leadership so that people feel it, So I think that's really been the main thing is, asking more questions, looking for and trying to create more engagement. And I think I was also, kind of learning about leadership under the model of situational leadership, which I think is very people focused, right? And it's situational leadership is really about thinking about your leadership style as it relates to the person that you are leading on the task that they're involved in. And you got to be able to flex and match what the need is by, your team members and by your people. So they will feel that, wow, I'm getting an exact leadership style I need based on kind of what I'm doing today on this task. And, and then in the end, I think what that all means is, I think the final pivot for me is this idea, like LaTanya was saying, it's not just people first, but, we all have to, what's the saying? It's like no margin, no mission, right? So it is a business for most of us. There needs to be cash generated, profit generated, so that we can live out the mission and can reward and recognize people and invest in the business. So it's the concept of it's people and results. So back in the day, maybe it was all just about short-term results. And some of that is still out there. But if you think about people and results in that order, I think that's kind of where I've tried to keep that now front of mind as my kind of leadership philosophy.
Yeah. I think that makes me think back to me getting into this world of learning and development like 2 decades ago. So when I was 15, clearly.
Nice.
And LaTanya, that was not necessary to laugh out loud. But I think about, we really did focus on, as we were, and it was in retail, we were training leaders. But what we were doing was we were really mainly training them on the tasks and all the technical side, how to make things look good, how to do all the things, without the focus at first being about the people who were going to get the things done. Now, what was really great was a mentor of mine who came on board pretty quickly after being in this organization. We started focusing on people. And so we didn't call it human-centric leadership, but as I really remember, so much of what we brought to the table was about helping people understand that the people are getting all the stuff done that we were training them on. So we really relooked at how we were training. And I think about the evolution of that over the years. And as I have led teams, and recently taking over a team here at Talent Smart, being able to kind of see, how do you sit and have a conversation differently with people who are even doing the same thing? Because that's what makes, I think, that human-centric, is that you might be doing the same job, but a big part of it is you all do it differently and you all have different needs, which is something, we talk about here at Talent Smart with EQ and talking about needs, that it's important for us to be human-centric with what are the needs of everybody who's doing their job. Great question, I think, for both of you. I'm sorry, you would add something to that, Howard?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just something you said there and even earlier that I wanted to clarify and reiterate a bit is, about taking care of your people and they will take care of your customers. And then you added such a critical piece, which is when you talk about taking care of your customers, their customers, it's internal and external, and it's like so important to speak about that because the cross-functional collaboration and how everybody has internal customers, not everybody has external customers.
Right.
But both of those are really powerful. If you're taking great care of your people, they're going to take care of each other in addition to the external customers. So I thought that was a great point to add in there too.
For sure. And also another piece that I wanted to highlight is how historically most companies promote it based on technical skills, right?
Yeah.
So we're really good at doing this. I'm going to put you in charge of the whole department.
Right.
And so what we have had to reimagine and rediscover is that it takes another skill set, right, to be able to lead other people to do something. And so we have had to shift. And I learned about it as soft skills, but in my mind, really, they're critical skills that are needed. No matter what job you do, no matter what business you are in, we are all in the people business.
Yeah. I'd love to get any comments from everybody who's chiming in and listening to us right now. What do you think about that? Have any of your experiences been that you're seeing a little bit more focus on human-centric leadership right now? While we're waiting to see if there's any comments out there, I'm curious for both of you. So, we defined the why, but sometimes trying to explain why to other people is a little more difficult. So, meaning, for LaTanya, you with organizations that you're consulting with, and also for Howard with the people that you lead, who also lead other people, how does it sound different when you're making the case for it's important to be human-centric focused when you're building your people? LaTanya, let me start with you. How does it sound different coming out of your mouth now?
Yeah, I first have to think about my why, right? So I'm compelled to first think about why is that important to me as a consultant, as a CEO, as a manager of people. And so for me, it boils down to my caring about people. Mm-hmm. It's really simple, right? So I care about people beyond as it benefits me, though. So most of the time in the workforce, we say, hey, I care about you, but it is as it benefits me. As long as you're doing what I need you to do, I care about you. And we hoard talent that way. I just want you to be on my team, right? Instead of really doing the best interest of the people. And so for me, it is what is in your best interest as it relates to you professionally and personally. And I think even more we're seeing kind of the shared responsibility between organizations and people when it comes to personal and professional development, right? So that is one piece, and it kind of sounds a little bit different when you articulate it to other organizations, but really it boils down to our humanness, right? And so our humanness really informs us that we have more alike or more in common than not, right? And when we talk about leadership, it's not about the title, right? It's about how am I able to influence other people? And so those are just a few things that I try to explain as we are kind of trying to unpack the why behind it. I mean, we know that employees are 2.5 times more likely to be satisfied with their job if they have a close relationship with their manager or with their leader. And so there's some undeniable benefits, innovation, retention, creativity, team building, right? There's some undeniable benefits to being human-centric in the workplace.
Absolutely. And Belinda, great comment that Belinda said in the comments about it's essential in retention.
For sure.
I mean that in alone, I think, is a big selling point for why we've got to have, a human-centric development of people. Howard, what are you thinking on this topic here about how to sound differently, if at all, for you when you're explaining to others?
Well, yeah, and I think Belinda just took my first point as well about retention, right? And so there's a lot of data out there in terms of people leave organizations typically because of their relationship with their manager. People want to feel connected, to their manager, to their leader, and to others in their organization, And so I think that's where this whole people first, model works. And I think what the other part I share is just the role of the leader, perfect world, or leaders, is to kind of establish the vision and shape the culture and set the strategy and action plans. And then perfect world, get out of the way, right? Because you've got very capable people that you have developed. You want to empower them. And if they have demonstrated they're ready for that, then you set the table, and then you let people kind of, again, show up with their skills and do their best work. So I think the more you can kind of boil it down to that, and what you see in a day-to-day intimate work environment, whether it's virtual or face-to-face, it's very real. And if we're not operating that way, it's going to be very difficult to attract and retain the best and brightest talent that you're looking for.
Yeah. I love a couple comments that are on side. Veronica brings up a good point about soft, and I'm glad you put that word in quotes, because I think sometimes we use the word soft leadership skills, and really that doesn't necessarily give it the power that really it is. And I think some of the things that we've talked about is that really these are power leadership skills, right? And especially for you talking about in a construction industry, it's a new concept, and it's allowed you to shine in an industry that you love. Because bringing something in that's a little bit new, I would imagine, makes people sit up and pay attention to, well, what is this that you're bringing into the course here? I get to work luckily all over the world with our programming from Talent Smart, and a couple of my clients over time, I've had such a mix of blue collar, white collar, and no matter where I'm finding leaders, I'm finding they still need the skills to understand how to deal and work with people, just people in general. Let me ask both of you this question. So, we know that a lot of organizations that we said, maybe unprioritized, good word to use, right? Development for a number of reasons. It could be, hey, we didn't do development during the pandemic, and so we kind of are on our wrong footing right now. Or it could be budgeting, could be resources, could be that they're having a hard time finding time to do it. But I think this is a good question to ask is, why should organizations reconsider this to actually reinvest in developing leaders? Because if they don't, what's potentially going to happen? Howard, why don't you tackle that one first, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, well, I think we've been hinting at a lot of these things, right? In terms of the difficulty in attracting and retaining good people. If they're not feeling connected, have a best friend in the organization, feel connected to their leader, all those things are suddenly at risk. And, so you build internally, and what we share with a lot of our Talent Smart customers is kind of what is the business case for building and developing leadership capacity at organizations. And when you can do that, the impact on performance can be exponential. And I know LaTanya was talking about the Gallup studies, and there's Gartner studies out there that are powerful. What do they say? There's a quote they have about when human-centric work practices are implemented, employees are something like 3.5 times more likely to be high performers. They're almost 3.5 times more likely to stay. So there's a lot of data in there that most people see, the high cost of attrition and all those things. The other one that I thought was really fascinating, and I know we've talked about the Great Resignation or quiet quitting. The thing that I think is the ultimate cost to an organization is actually when people quit and stay. Disengaged employees quit and stay, which is different than quiet quitting, which might just attribute to like they're not fully disengaged. They're just like, I'm not going to do anything up above and beyond my job description. I'm not going to work crazy hours either, But quit and stay of disengaged employees means they're still, in the organization and potentially contaminating the hallway, water cooler conversations or virtual conversations. So that's the last thing. That's a real risk, right? The quit and stay situation is even harder sometimes to see, but the impact can be really, really damaging. And then to your other point, I would turn back to LaTanya and you, David, because you guys have had a lot of experience in various roles in your career. Sometimes it's just not possible to invest a lot in developing leaders or future leaders or frontline folks. The budget's not there. We just have to recognize that sometimes. But it just feels like there's a lot of creative things that talent development managers and chief learning officers have done during times of low budget. So I just feel like, and I'd love to hear from folks on the line too, is what have you seen done when you don't really have any budget? An example might be a buddy system or a mentoring program that you have had or put in place. So I don't know, maybe David, going to you first. Love to hear from you, from your years of experience, and then LaTanya also.
Yeah, you really do have to become creative whenever you are realizing, okay, I want to do this, but here's my budget, and it's this small. And when I was in the corporate world, we were very creative about doing things like lunch and learns. And even though lunch and learn could mean I'm providing lunch, we often would say, bring your lunch. We're going to actually do 45 minutes, and hopefully you're going to learn something. And so at first, I recall, especially the organization that we did it the most at, that it was like a touch and go at the beginning, but then we were sold out every time, because what it became was short, quick things to help you become a better leader. And it was all from the human-centric perspective. And it was really bringing topics that people weren't just going to get by walking down the hall or reading a book. It was like some key things. Emotional intelligence, we're going to talk about a little bit more of that in a second here, but was one of our topics that we would talk about. How do you become a more emotionally intelligent leader? And so that was one big thing. And one other one I'll throw up before Tanya chimes in on this. But we would also, especially whenever we knew people weren't all in one location, this was before the pandemic, but we had leaders around the country. And what we would do is we would pull them on to quick 30-minute, webinar type things, but it was interactive. So it allowed people that were leaders in the field to feel very engaged with what was going on at our corporate office. LaTanya, what do you have to add to that?
So at a very basic level, if we just simplify it to just a hello, when people feel seen and they feel heard and they feel acknowledged, that means something. So I remember teaching a class at a facility, and there was a leader in the class who had 5 people on his team. And so we're talking, and I said, this sounds amazing. What are your 5 people's names?
Oh, no.
Crickets, right? It was like, and you have 5 people and can't tell me their name. I tell you what, the level of homework, it's like the next time that we see each other, know people's names, right? And I understand there are some people who manage hundreds of people. So maybe you don't know every single person's name every time you see them, but make it a priority, right? And also get to know your people. That is critical. I went to lunch with one of my teams, and I manage teams in different areas, but one of my teams I went to lunch with, and I was able to order everybody's lunch and drinks because I am an observer and a learner of people. That is important to me.
Yeah.
And so another thing, though, to your point, as far as activities that we can do and things that we can implement to get to know our people, that doesn't cost a thing, right? We know smiles don't cost a thing. We know just saying hello and getting to know people doesn't cost a thing. I would also do virtual happy hours and virtual game nights, because one of the things is people, we work, as you said, David, from different parts of the country. How is it that we can still pull together and get to know each other? We know that that's one of the qualities of high performing teams, is that
Yeah.
we understand each other's strengths, we understand, and we prop each other up in other areas where we're not that strong. Well, the only way to know that is to get to know each other. And so plenty of activities, starting with things that are really, really basic, so that we interject again that humanness, that we have more in common than not. The more that we see that, the more tighter our teams are.
Yeah, I love that. And we're kind of leading into this great conversation that I'd love to be able to turn, to what we do here at Talent Smart, which is bringing emotional intelligence into the discussion. And I love that several of you that have been listening in have been referencing some of the work that we do here. But we have certainly seen that EQ can be a very essential part of a multitude of solutions for organizations and for people. And when you think about bringing EQ into the equation for human-centric leadership, I think this has a big place here. So I'd love to just know, we have strategies that we use at Talent Smart here. LaTanya is a certified facilitator of our level 1 program, which is how I met LaTanya for the first time back in the fall last year in Washington, D.C. And I know you've been using our program. So when you think about some strategies that really come to mind to really help with human-centric leadership, and these, for anybody who's looking for a great read on EQ, our Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book is a phenomenal book, been on the Wall Street Journal's best-selling list for quite a long time now. But it's a great place. LaTanya, give us a couple of your steadfast strategies that you think really fit into human-centric leadership.
For sure, top of the list, and there is no debate in my mind, top of the list for me. This first strategy, it falls under self-awareness. It literally changed my life, and that is a huge call out to the power of it. And it is, stop treating your feelings as good or bad.
Yeah.
And so when we label our feelings, we literally lose the ability to pick them up, to examine them, and then to make a choice that better serves us. The other part to that is sometimes we don't sit in our emotions. My grandmother used to say, just sit with it for a while, right? And sometimes we have to sit with it for a while to fully get an understanding of the root cause. Now, how that plays out in the workplace is that if we don't understand us, we really have a hard time understanding other people. So we have to first understand our emotional makeup before we can tap into social awareness and relationship management. So for me, that's number one. And then a close second falls under self-management for me. And it is your self-talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being able to understand and to manage yourself. What are you saying to yourself? It matters, because you listen to you more than you listen to anybody else. And so it is understanding that our self-talk has to be short and simple and positive and in your own words. And if we're able to change the way that we talk to ourselves, we can also change the way we talk to other people, which is a huge part of human-centric leadership.
Yeah, you mentioned about self-management. I mean, you kind of really said with like sitting on it. I mean, your grandmother had something to say. I mean, one of our strategies, well, several of our strategies happen to be about kind of pausing. So sleep
Correct.
on it, count to 10, right? Doing any of those things. So grandma knew what she was talking about sitting on it, right? Because sometimes that saves you from making somebody else feel in a way that you did not mean for them to feel that way too. Yeah, so love that grandma knew EQ before we even right?
That's very true.
So, Howard, what stands out for you from a strategy or two?
Yeah, well, LaTanya hit on several, and I love that one of the ones I had on there too is kind of paying attention to and minimize the negative self-talk. And I remember seeing at one point, it's like, would you ever talk to other people the way you're talking to yourself in your head? It's like, you know what, how rude would that be? So I think that's a great one. But yeah, a few that I try to build into my kind of daily reminders. One is, around listening, and, the expression of listen with the intent of being influenced is truly, I think, a sharper way to think about listening. Everybody can talk about active listening and leaning forward and, paying attention and playing back. But to me, if I'm thinking about, I'm actually listening to be influenced and not to respond or debate, but how might this influence me, I think is a real big one. Another emotional intelligence strategy, I think, from Talent Smart for me has been, being open and curious, right? Yeah. Ask more questions, be open to ideas. Don't be so quick to be like, yep, we tried that, can't do that, doesn't work. So being open and curious, stepping into other people's shoes, I think is one that I try to, always keep in the back of my mind before I jump to solution or reaction or things like that. So, and then I think one that I love is, like take your work seriously, but don't take yourselves too seriously, and I'm talking to myself, right? It's like I take my work seriously, but don't take, myself so seriously that you can't have fun and enjoy, because we spend an awful lot of time in our workplaces, virtual or face-to-face, and you want to make that a fun and enjoyable part and rewarding and all those things. So got to take it seriously, and we don't need to always take ourselves too seriously. So yeah, David, you've been living this. I mean, you must have a bunch that you are living by or trying to live by.
Trying to live by, right? And I think the one, I'm going to actually borrow one of the ones you said, because the being open and curious, for me, that becomes, I think when you're talking about human-centric leadership, nothing gets you more into understanding somebody else than being open and curious. Because for me, that comes with a lot of weight, meaning that I need to be willing to listen. I need to be willing to ask some questions. So the curiosity is the question asking, right? But the being open is sometimes hearing what somebody's response is that maybe I wasn't planning on it. Maybe it surprises me. And I think that is part of the beauty of getting to know your people, is being open and curious on a constant basis, not just like in a meet and greet at the beginning with, right? I think that the more you get to know your people, kind of like what LaTanya was talking about before, gosh, the better and stronger that relationship's going to be. But I think also it's going to make the leaders that you're trying to develop feel how that makes them feel, so that they can then pay that in turn. Like for me, it's about that next step about like, oh, wow, all those questions, they weren't as intrusive as maybe somebody might have thought they were. I'm going to try the same thing with my people, or when I get a team underneath me. And I always think about that's the pay it forward part of EQ as well. Is like, how do I make sure, because people always ask me in classes, by the way, how do I help other people with their emotional intelligence? And I always say model. Just be the model of good emotional intelligence, because you can't go and teach people EQ. It's hard for me to teach people EQ, and I'm a master certified facilitator for us, but I try and just influence them on, here's what you want to try, here's what you might get from it, and sharing experiences with that too. But that is my biggest strategy that I continue to try and use. I think with one question that we've not really explored, and I think it'd be really important for us to share with our thoughts about what's the risk. So meaning that we talked about the what, the why, about also some of the challenges organizations have out there. But what would you say is the risk if we do not start looking at building leaders with a human-centric viewpoint, and essentially just keep doing all what we did before? What's the risk? Howard, give me some risk from you.
Just losing employee engagement and losing your employees. And as we said, if you're not taking care of your employees, you're going to lose your customers. So it's kind of just, you got to get all in this direction. It's what employees are now looking for and asking for. They're not just looking for a paycheck. They're not just looking for a secure environment they can stay for 15 or 20 years. They want to be part of something special where they are listened to and heard and get to contribute. So the risks of not doing that are pretty significant.
Yeah, yeah. How about for you, Tanya? What do you
I
think?
mean, you can add to all of that productivity and the loss
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
you know, research shows that every year, United States companies, we lose $350 billion in productivity because of people not having good relationships with their manager, right? And
yeah,
so it is the cost is huge, and we will continue to struggle. So if we are unable to understand human-centric leadership, if we are unable to put that at the forefront, we can forget about ROI. We will continue to manage a revolving door, and it is sad to think about, because all it takes is a little bit of care. All it takes is someone being heard, acknowledged, a sense of belonging. You belong here. We want you here. And by the way, we have a plan for you. Because when we look at millennials within the workplace, one of the things, I think it was something like 87% of them, when they get jobs, they're looking at what are the opportunities for me.
yeah.
And to your point, Howard, it's not just about the paycheck, it is deeper than that. And then when we look at all sorts of loneliness in the workplace, we look at all of these other factors that are interwoven into our humanness.
Hmm.
It would just be a shame, and it continues to be a travesty if we just ignore that. It is not it is a simple fix, not necessarily easy, but it is pretty simple. We
Right.
just need to care about our people.
Yeah, and I love that you said simple, not easy. Right? We say
Yeah,
that a lot of times in the classes
yeah,
that we work with organizations in emotional intelligence, saying sounds simple, but it's not very easy. And Belinda asked a great question: what's our recommendation as to the training needed to develop human-centric leadership? And I think as we were just talking a little bit about bringing EQ into the equation, here's why I think emotional intelligence could be such a great foundation. I'll let you two both chime in too. I have found in my experience, I've been now here with Talent Smart for 3 years. I've traveled the world doing this, both virtually and in person. And I find that people are the same everywhere. I find that people need to understand a couple of things, that they are important and that they're not just being looked at as the widget to get stuff done.
for sure.
I have certainly found that people appreciate being appreciated. And when people understand emotional intelligence, bringing that in, I think about, for those of you who are not as familiar as maybe some others on listening in about EQ, the four core skills are about self-awareness and self-management, but then also it's about social awareness and relationship management. And I think about those last two being such a key for being able to show people that you care, because when you are understanding your people more and you can build those bridges to help them realize that you are there for them and not just the stuff you need them to get done,
Mhm.
bringing emotional intelligence into, not just to be the fixer, by the way, but it's part of a solution that really kind of complements a lot of the other trainings that many organizations have. And I'm not talking about the task-oriented training, right?
Right.
I'm talking about the other things like leadership skills,
Mhm.
communication skills. But when you bring emotional intelligence into that, it's a great kind of binder for it. Anything that you all think that you might add? And thank you, Belinda, for that question. I think it's a great question.
I echo what you said about emotional intelligence. I mean, being a trainer of leadership skills, I think EQ touches on so many different
Yeah.
avenues, right? So if we just would learn a little bit more about how to communicate, a lot of that dealing with just active listening and what you talked about earlier, David, with that curiosity piece, right? That's one
Mhm.
of the most underrated qualities of a leader, is the ability to be curious and not accusatory, right? And so that takes care of our biases in a lot of different areas, because the reason why we have so many biases is because we don't know people, right? We only make up the
So
story.
well said. That's
Yeah,
very well said. Yeah.
I don't know you, so I make up a narrative for you. And so
Mhm.
it is those basic skills of getting to know each other, team building, um, creating spaces where people feel both emotionally and psychologically safe, not just physically safe. I think that's a huge part of it too. And so, Belinda, when we look at just some really fundamental leadership training curriculum, it really centers around first me getting to know me. I think it starts with the journey of self-awareness, and then it fans out into our people.
Yeah, great. Howard, any thoughts on that?
No, I think that that's a great way to wrap it there, Latanya. It's like so much that is, it starts with self-awareness, and I think emotional intelligence is really a foundational skill to address all these things, but it starts with knowing self and how one manages oneself, and then how you start to understand and empathize with others. And then, we didn't even talk about things like, that will help build trust, that will help build collaboration, that will help create more engaged cultures if folks have worked on and improved their own emotional intelligence skills.
Yeah. Great work. Thank you both so much. Latanya and Howard, appreciate you both giving your thoughts on this important topic. And I'll remind everybody who's been tuning in, whether here on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, or you're watching the recording of this after, if you have any interest in learning a little bit more about our emotional intelligence programs, how they might fit into your solutions, especially if it's about human-centric leadership, please feel free to reach out to us. I'll ask our producer to put our contact information in the comment section. Also, I will make sure that I ask our producer to put Latanya's information from Sumter Consulting. Remember, Latanya is in Virginia area, but I have a feeling that Latanya would probably go anywhere that you ask her to go to as well. We are a global organization, so please, by all means, feel free to reach out just to have a conversation, and we're more than happy to do that. And we'll be back, by the way, August 24th with our next Emotional Intelligence for Your Everyday Life. We will be discussing a topic that I am sure every one of you are dealing with, and that is how to successfully manage and lead constant change. Joining me are two incredible women who have a lot to say about this topic. One is our internal EVP of Client Solutions and Marketing. It is Taryn McKenzie, and we have an incredible woman who is the Metro New York office managing partner of Ernst & Young. We have Alicia Steinman joining us as well. So please join us if you can. Thank you all for joining us today. And just remember that EQ is for your everyday life. We'll see you next time.